Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Along Come Norwich YouTube channel for what I hope is going to be a brief video, but a video that comes at an interesting time in this Norwich City timeline, if you will. The AGM took place last night, and as of the last sort of few hours, Norwich City have released an in-house interview with director Mark Atanasio, an interview which I'm glad I saw after the video. I don't think it's really swayed my opinion either way, but it's interesting content to sort of consume before giving a few thoughts. This AGM was I mean, I wasn't there myself, but it comes at a time where it was always going to be, I think, a bit tense. Norwich AGMs very rarely aren't tense, which includes the one I've been to, which it was, yeah, it's all usually very tense because there's always something to complain about, as we'll get into in due course. But on the whole, for as much as there is to sort of, you know, complain about and be a little bit concerned about and raise just general queries about, there are a few positives for me, and I'm going to do my very best to put a more positive spin on things at the moment. The irony being that that will then lead to questions and possibly a few moans from myself. But the main takeaways, and just quickly, just this is the opinion of a fan. This is the understanding of the AGM of just another fan. I don't boast any inside knowledge or anything like that. This is just my opinion. I just wanted to sort of make that abundantly clear. But in terms of positives, we'll start with Mark Atanasio, and I'm basing this off the Pinkin article that I read of the AGM itself, as well as the interview after, which I watched on the Pinkin YouTube channel, but it was almost like a round table where I think Rob Butler went first, and then it was Connor Southwell, and then it was Michael Bailey at the end. And some good questions were asked, some brave questions from Connor certainly were asked, and some interesting answers were given. My general opinion on Mark Atanasio has gone up quite a lot before the AGM. You know, he was a nice idea, but I didn't really have much of a clue about him. Um, Based off of last night and this interview I've just watched, I'm quite excited, and it's a mixture of me looking at him and thinking, without all the context of the situation Norwich find themselves in, a lot of it is this guy's very clearly switched on when it comes to one, money, but two, money in sports, and obviously baseball, which is his background, and he bought the Milwaukee Brewers, I think he said 20 odd years ago. That knowledge is going to be very important, and that fresh insight that doesn't have that emotional attachment to football could go one of two ways, but I think it's more likely to go in the way of it will just be a massive help for Norwich City. And the thing I took from it really is that I do think he wants full control eventually. How soon that is, I think it's very much as soon as Delia Smith wants to leave, really. And I'm not really going to get into, despite thinking it, I'm not going to get into his facial reactions to some of the things that Delia Smith was saying. I don't think there's really that much in there, but I did sort of look and think, oh, yeah, perhaps not the greatest face to be pulling whilst Delia is saying whatever Delia was saying. But he seems like a very switched on man, and I like this idea of taking a more subjective approach. And the point he made in the interview with the club was along the lines of, your eyes can deceive you. And obviously that works both ways. If you see something that isn't great, but you think it's good, then your eyes are deceiving you, aren't they? And there's this idea of, you see something that you don't think is, or no, I don't know, the vice versa to whatever I just said. But it was an interesting take to have, and I think financially the biggest thing is, I mean, the man's worth is a lot of money, and it's this idea of, he is happy to invest, and the big thing that I took from it is this idea of, and when I say I took from it, I'm trying to push the angle of it's my opinion as opposed to hearing it from someone else. But this idea of eliminating third party financing, and Norwich are in debt, and they will be in debt, but it'll be to his group, which is basically internal debt, and that debt is his investment as opposed to third party financing. I don't think I really need to explain that too much, but and I needed it pretty much all explained to me through his videos, but also through Connor's and Sam's and Paddy's videos on the Pink, and but external debt is where things get a bit murky and a bit untrustworthy even at times. And this idea that our debt is his investment is one that is refreshing, and it does remind us that we are a big football club, despite what the external noise sometimes is. How far you look for that external noise uh, is always sort of up for debate, isn't it? But it reminds us that we are a big club. We've got a great setup, and we have a setup worth investing. And Delia Smith, I believe, said there was 4 candidates for this investment that we needed. Mark Atanasio being the best. So people were interested, which is always good, because there was almost a narrative, wasn't there, at times that Delia, I think, again, it gets murky as to whether she pushed it or not, or whether it was just sort of the paper spin on it. But there was this idea out there of, well, when there's investment interest, we'll listen. But we hadn't heard anything for so long, which obviously isn't the case anymore. So they're my positives, which are, he seems like a very switched on bloke, far more switched on than the current owners. This idea again of he straight up said switching coaches 3 times is not a sign of things are going well, which we all know. It's just sort of nice to hear that, and it's just sort of unfortunate to a degree that they're holding firm on a coach that we know is not good enough. It's just the principle at the moment, which we'll get onto in the second half of the video. But they're my positives. My negatives, but not so good, are Dealer and Michael's approach. I think this is the first time that I've really sat there and thought, yeah, it probably is time for them to leave, because Dealer and Michael, the first thing Rob asked them was about, can we sort of turn it around? And the first response was, yeah, why not? And it's a bit like, oh, that's, I kind of wanted to hear some monologue on about how things are going to be all right, as opposed to, yeah, why not? Which then, I know it's not, you know, it's not completely their decision in terms of managers and progress on the pitch, but it's a bit like, right, if you want to push a positive narrative, don't answer the question of, can we turn this around, with why not? So that was my first thing. The second thing was the, I mean, I get it to a degree, but it was the defense of Stuart Webber, and maybe not acknowledging why that relationship deteriorated. I think there is almost this perception, from me especially, of, we all understand what Stuart Webber did. I really appreciate what he did, but he has had as many failings essentially as he has successes, from a fan's perspective, and that's kind of what the game's about. And this staunch defense of Stuart Webber, I understand, but it also would have been nice to humanize the situation and maybe try and understand both sides. If you want to keep your fans on side, Delia went for the, um, I think she said it was 80% fans. Don't really know what she meant by that, and then 20% boo boys, uh, which I don't know what you're trying to achieve by saying that. All you're doing is strengthening what Stuart Webber started, and creating that divide. Um, in terms of in terms of perception of fans, of, well, hang on a minute, you view a lot of us as fans, and you view a lot of us as boo boys. I mean, whatever you want to call them, really, it's a strange thing, but that I find a little peculiar. Um, I think we do owe thanks to Delia and Michael. We owe massive thanks to them. You know, I've only ever seen them at the helm of this football club in my lifetime, and we thank them again for helping to find what is hopefully the next chapter of Norwich City. But it really is time to move on. And yeah, as I said, it's the first time that these comments of proper, like, Delia, I've always tried to defend the model, and I've always tried to say you can still be successful in the current model, which I believe a club can be. I believe a club that is completely self-financing, and self-financing is a model that, in terms of that label, Mark Atanasio didn't want to move away from. And I do believe you can still be successful with it, but it, we perhaps aren't going to be as self-financed as we once were. So at this point, I'm ready to sort of say thank you and goodbye. Will that be anytime soon? I don't think so. It was interesting as well. She almost seemed to dodge the question. I think it was from Rob Butler about support for David Wagner. We've heard this narrative of David Wagner himself and Zoe Webber in the program giving, like, undying support for David Wagner, essentially, and it was almost dodged in that sort of round table that they had at the end. So I was a bit like, oh, okay, maybe the narrative is slightly changing. And Ben Knapper is a name we haven't actually mentioned yet, but his approach was very much, I've only been in the job 18 days, guys, and to be honest with you, I understand. And I think, okay, fair enough. You've got a lot on your plate. The comments about Knapper revealing his characteristics to a degree, and it's the way things are going being a sign of things to come. I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of knee jerk reactions, which I understand out of frustration, but I don't think by any means that anything that's happening now is a complete reflection on Ben Knapper. He's been here a few weeks, and I think I saw some tweet saying, "Well, he's had the job for a few months." It's a bit like, yeah, but come on, play the game, understand that the circumstances, which are the guy has got a hell of a job on, compared to Stuart Webber when he came in the sense of not a more difficult job, but a very different task where Webber basically came in and was told, do what you want and build from the bottom up. Norwich are at this position now where there is actually expectation, but like proper expectation. And we've been told we've got the wonderful training ground. We've been told we want to expand Carrow Road, all this. And he's come into a job where, from mine and your perspective, we're not seeing much different to when Stuart Webber came in. So his job behind the scenes is as hard as it is in terms of improving that squad, because we have got a whole month to go until he can then start signing players, and then it's about resource. And Atanasio addressed this, and they've spoken about how can we fund certain things, but then he's got to do it with a head coach and a squad. Where is it worth sacking the head coach and trying to get a bunch of young players in and maybe risking relegation to a degree, like Norwich did with Farker in the first season? Without James Maddison, there's always that question of what would have happened. Um, or do you kind of bide your time and wait until Ben Napper picks his right player, man, and then signs the right players for that man? Um, yeah, it's just a bit like, if that is the case, and that very much is the case in my head, I have this like dream vision of Atanasio biding his time until he can fully take the reins. And it's not going to be we then have £150 million to spend every transfer window, but he takes the reins. This infrastructure that he speaks of continues to develop and to grow. Financially, Norwich become way more stable, and this debt becomes an investment as opposed to third party financing and all these other terms that you hear. And then you have Ben Napper is sort of biding his time and not sacking Wagner, because Atanasio has made this point that, you shouldn't keep sacking your coach until he picks his correct man out, and then he can then properly implement over a few windows, because it's going to take 3, 4, 5 windows to get Norwich in a much better position than what they are now, because players need to be sold, they need to be released. You have to go through, as Stuart Webber proved, you have to go through quite a lot of players to get through to the ones you really want, especially with the vast amount of change that Norwich really need at the moment. And I have that vision, but yeah, it then begs the question of that fan perspective. Again, that perspective, I really feel that pinch of, well, hang on a minute, I pay X amount per month to go and watch my team, but I'm having to sit there and justify, oh, well, it'll all be right in the future. But as that money comes out of my bank account and I have to go and sit and watch this team, and I get told off for booing a team that are really crap and are showing no real signs of improvement, it's then like, well, what's the point of any of the future if right now, especially when that narrative of be patient isn't there, that narrative that I'm having to build up in my head, and I'm having to come on, well, I'm not having to, but I'm coming on camera and maybe just trying to make you feel a bit more positive. That narrative is only up here, and if it was being pushed, it would be a little bit easier. But if I wasn't having to sit there and justify to myself these things, as I pay, in my opinion, a lot of money, which I know people pay a lot more money as well. I don't sit in a particularly expensive part of the ground, but I know people are paying a lot more money. But as you have to pay that money, it's like, oh my God, we get so caught up in this loop of, well, hang on a minute, the future is just around the corner. But right now it's terrible. And that, for me, there's never been a more conflicting crossroads at Norwich City of, there have been times where we all know a manager has to go. Like with Alex Neil, we all knew Alex Neil had to go. And then I think it was like Jez Moxey at the time, wasn't it? We all knew he had to go. And then we had this Daniel Farke, and we had this Stuart Webber era of things going really well for quite a while. And as I said, there's been times where everyone knows which way the club has to go, and then it happens. But at the moment, it feels like it's not going to happen. So yeah, and by that I mean sort of on the pitch matters. So it's a tough one. But they're my thoughts. I think there are a lot of positives there, and in the same respect as I did sort of with Daniel Farke until it really was time to go, I think my narrative of trying to be positive is going to be looking at the future and the elements of the future that are exciting, elements that make things worth waiting for to a degree. But it's really hard to look away from the money we pay to watch a team who aren't very good, who are not improving, who are a team of players who really aren't at an age to improve, apart from a handful of them. So yeah, it's a very tough one, but hopefully that is, a bit more positivity for you to, like me, grasp onto. I'm, as always, very, very keen to know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you want to subscribe, that'd be appreciated. I think, not sure when we'll do it, but the live streams should be back. As you can see, the StreamYard is back. We'll have some giveaways and stuff in them, but you have to be in the live streams to see what's being given away. Some Along Come Norwich goodness. But that is all for now. So, till next time, see you again very, very soon.